Margaret Davison is from Newton Aycliffe. She's been giving me her reaction.
Afternoon, Scott. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Not a problem. It is lovely to have you on BBC Radio Tees, and thanks for taking the time. Listen, tell me about your sister and how often you saw her in the care home before COVID.
My sister, Sandra, she had a stroke when she was only 57. So by the time COVID hit, we were sort of 10 years into the stroke.
Right.
The stroke left her badly disabled and with no meaningful speech. She had some cognitive problems. She went into care in about 2017. She'd started with dementia problems. It was never ideal because Sandra was so much younger. She was still only in her 60s at that point, so much younger than the other residents, couldn't easily communicate her needs. But it only really worked while I was able to go in and give Sandra lots of support, which I did almost on a daily basis. I used to spend long hours there. Sometimes I would go back. I would go at one point in the day. Sandra might be asleep, so I might decide to go back later. And, of course, there were no restrictions. You just came and went at any time of the day, night, it didn't matter. And then, of course, COVID struck and they locked down the care homes. Well, and then immediately I was just barred from going in there. And it was 9 months. They locked down middle of March and Sandra died in December. So effectively, I was barred from the last 9 months of her life. And those 9 months were horrendous. They really were.
I can only imagine, just listening to you.
She needed looking after. I don't mean we treated her like a child. We didn't, but the stroke left her childlike in a lot of ways, and you wouldn't leave a child. I said to one of the care staff, she'll never thrive without me. And she didn't. There were various things happened. She had a fracture, which wasn't picked up on. She fell. They were being shut in the rooms for long periods of time. The way it was explained to me, I think she'd been calling for help, not getting the help. But the doctors, the nurses weren't going in. They were diagnosing via video link. And she ended up going to hospital. And she'd been sitting with a fracture for 8 to 10 days at that point. So we were terrified out of our wits, really. She could have just felt abandoned. Why are you not coming in anymore, you know?
Do you think that things would have been different if you'd have been allowed in on a more regular basis? Maybe not so much on a daily basis like you had been doing, but maybe certainly a couple of times a week.
Yeah, I don't think they should have. What they did was there was a blanket ban, and I think that was totally wrong. They shouldn't have done that. They should have risk assessed on an individual basis. Decline was more rapid because I wasn't there. I was with her at the end. From about October time, she'd stopped eating and drinking. She was refusing. She wouldn't take her medication. Got a phone call about 4:30 in the afternoon. Basically, they were saying she was end of life. At that point, they weren't even sure whether she would get through the night. Yeah. I just went straight over there. I mean, for weeks, I'd been watching her through the care. I was having these window visits, but Sandra was laid in bed dying, and I'm outside, and I just couldn't get in, couldn't get in to be with her.
Do you feel that you've been able to grieve?
No, I don't.
Because of everything that's going on.
It's 2.5 years on, and I don't feel that because I've never properly cried. All I can remember is the trauma. I can never forgive.
And let me ask you then, Margaret, what's your reaction to today's news, the fact that Boris Johnson has been found to have deliberately and repeatedly misled Parliament?
That makes me angry. What adds to my anger at this point is because what we've learned later is they were practically carrying on as normal. So while he was having his garden parties, and there were the days when I was stood looking through a care home window watching my sister die. When he was having his Christmas parties, I was planning Sandra's funeral, a funeral where we were limited by numbers. We couldn't have a get-together after, all of those kind of things. And Sandra wasn't the only relative that I lost at that point. We lost about 4 family members in the space of a month. And then when you find out in government, it just gets you so angry because in government they were just carrying on as normal. And they've not shown any remorse. They've never said sorry. They just move on with their lives. We've got this COVID inquiry, which will be going on for goodness knows how long. Who's going to be held to account, and how are they going to be held to account?
And what would you like to see the government to do now?
I would like for somebody to say sorry. We got it wrong. It would go some way. It wouldn't be enough, but it would go some way. I belong to a group, Rights for Residents. So recently they were taking the case to Parliament, and just last week there was an MP, a Labour MP, Dan Carden. He put forward a 10-minute rule bill. It's called a Care Supporters Bill, which would basically, if there was ever another pandemic, that there would always be one member of the family that would be able to go in and support their relative, not just in care homes, in hospitals as well, so that there's some kind of legacy. Because we can't bring our loved ones back. If we can put some kind of a legacy in place that they can never do that again, for me, I would feel, well, we've achieved something.
It's Margaret Davison from Newton Aycliffe, who lost her sister Sandra during COVID, and just chatting to me quite openly, quite honestly, a little earlier. Thank you so much as well.